Elemental reactions make Teyvat spin around. Yet unfortunately, not all reactions are created equal. So today, I thought it'd be fun to discuss some of the worst reactions in Genshin Impact that are in dire need of getting buffed, perhaps even discussing how they could be fixed. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. When I say getting buffed, that means both the addition or buffing of characters who can utilize said reaction effectively, or a change to the mechanics of how it works. With that out of the way, let's begin with Electro Charged. The main issue with it nowadays is that it just sort of exists. There will be good teams that have it, such as Raiden, Farina, Yelan teams, but they don't really do anything with it, kind of like how before Chevres came out, Raiden Hyper teams had Overload without any purpose. If we got a character like Chevres who helped Electro Charged actually mean something in these teams, it could help make it a more active thing to seek out. I know that it must be pretty annoying to hear, make a Chevres for it, every time the question of how to fix a reaction is brought up, but that's because she was so effective at what she did. Think about it. Overload would have easily made it into this video if it wasn't for her, yet it's because of her that it ended up being such a respected reaction in the end, because she did something very simple. She gave it purpose. Electro Charged lost said purpose a long time ago. It used to be the extremely budget-friendly option that you'd use to clear the Spiral Abyss before Hyperbloom came out. Any veterans recognize how good this team used to be? Abyss used to be so much more AoE-centric. Therefore, the big spread of electricity that occurred when many enemies were present made for a really good AoE comp. This benefited previously strong characters such as Beidou. However, when Hyperbloom came out, it took over as the main cheap team that you'd want to play. It could also use a full comp of 4 stars to great effect, yet it also had the gimmick of not needing to build crit stats going for it. Whereas for EC, you do. It didn't help that other really good AoE teams came along during Sumeru, such as Nilou Bountiful Core's Bloom. Hyper Bloom was far from the only killer of EC. We also have far more variety when it comes to effective team options for mobbing content compared to back in the 1 to 2.x era when EC was relevant. Imaginarium Theater will also not always have the correct elements to play a certain team archetype. I will say that if you play your cards right, you can avoid BS teams as much as possible. Yet even so, I don't want to use such a spontaneous game mode to judge an entire elemental reaction. But yes, it does do better in Theater than the Abyss to be fair, thanks to how it's more AoE centric. That's another thing. The current day Abyss is really boss heavy, and if it's not a boss, then it's 2-target. Notice how we're getting a lot of single target DPSs in Notlan, such as Mualani and Kinich, yet they're still both regarded as being quite good? That's because in actual Abyss gameplay, the importance of AoE has been diminished so much. Hyperbloom can deal with single target too, which is another mark against Electro Charged. So, as you can see, it lost all of its purpose, therefore making it rather irrelevant. We need a new unit that can help it adapt to the current times, while also adding a fresh flair to playing it. Yes, it's very easy to simply say, slap a Chevres on it and call it a day, but to be honest, I do think that would be the best case scenario here. It needs more single target and 2-target prowess. Someone who can make it worth running even when it is a boss situation. It also has to remain somewhat cheap, because it will never match up to the power of the really strong multiplicative reaction such as Vaporize, thanks to its nature as a transformative, so it's always going to be competing in the same field as other transformative reactions, which tend to be really cheap and accessible to build. Its main competition is easily Hyperbloom, which is what replaced it in the first place in my opinion. So make it cheap, accessible, decently strong for low investment players, while still feeling satisfying to play. They could even go down the Emily route. If the reaction itself is really beyond saving due to the highly AoE nature of it, then perhaps the idea of a strong sub-DPS that really wants Electro Charge could be put on the table. The problem is that then they'd be competing with somebody like Yelan in a Raiden double Hydro team. It's pretty hard to compete with such strong characters, though consider that somebody like Yelan is extremely versatile. Her being replaced in one team by a rather niche albeit effective support wouldn't suddenly make her a trash unit, the same way that Kazuha isn't trash just because he got replaced by Chevres in Electro and Pyro based teams. Consider that the state of Hydro 4 stars is also questionable. Xingqiu is amazing, Candice is great with Mualani and Arlecchino, Barbara is pretty neat in Farina Monohydro and Nilou Bloom. However, we, barely have any Hydro 4-star characters. It checks out, it's the best element in the game after all. I don't think anybody would reasonably argue against that. But if we were to get a unit like this, let's make them Hydro instead of Electro to balance things out a little, why don't we? Back to my point about Emily from a moment ago, she ended up being a very successful unit power-wise despite not wielding any buffs. She is purely a sub DPS. However, she still found a great place in Kenichi teams. Not even only those, but also a place in Mualani teams. Arlecchino teams is a Xiangling replacement, same for Linny. Sometimes dealing a frick ton of damage is all you need. We have great units that are Electro and Hydra already. It's not so much that the units who are capable of utilizing it are bad, no, not by any means. Electro charge teams are able to clear all the time, but they usually do so while ignoring the fact that they produce EC. It's more or less an irrelevant byproduct more than anything else. A dedicated EC unit would really help turn things around in that regard, breathing new life into it. Funnily enough, next we move on to a reaction that has the total opposite problem, where it is arguably one of the most potent reactions in the entire game, but there is literally only one guy who properly uses it, that being Riesli. Even then, holy guacamole, we need more characters who utilize it. I think this isn't even so much a problem with Melt, but is more so another, let's point and laugh at how bad Cryo has gotten moment. We've gotten some upgrades to burn Malgani over the years, and while that is indeed the GOAT's most competent team, it is far from being a team that you would choose over some of the other current top meta picks. Good on the Rio Beastly for being like the only guy who uses it well. Sure, he needs to C1 R1 to feel good to play, but the fact that his team still feels so solid as C0 R0 is testament to how Melt can carry you if it is even given a modicum of love. I'm 99% sure that the Saritsa will have something to do with Melt, because it's so unbelievably potent. It's kind of obvious that Hoyo is holding back with it on purpose, because if it got the same attention and care as Vape teams, dude, let's just say that I wouldn't be surprised if even the almighty Celestia Killer Nervalette team was challenged. Fixing Melt is very simple. It's not like EC where the original purpose of the reaction has been lost to both time and power creep, or that it has amazing potential users of it that have no niche support to help them capitalize on its presence. It's more so a matter of, Hoyo, please, come on, give us some sort of good cryo unit so that Melt actually has a chance. I do think that Shesnaya is gonna see one of the most drastic overhauls in terms of the meta since Sumeru, and that was when an entirely new element came out. Mark my words, Melt will eventually rule the world, and as a huge Cryo fan, I will be there to watch that happen very carefully. Superconduct is funny because it has both issues. The reaction itself is inherently kind of lame, and there are like no good characters who want it. I'm not gonna spend too much time clowning on Eula because come on, you've heard the spiel time and time again, it's old news at this stage. Eula's stinky backloaded DPS sucks no matter what way you look at it, and her supports are pretty much always better used elsewhere. She was chronicled for a reason, yada yada yada, you get the point. It's so funny to me that Fremine is literally better than Eula. Not by some absurdly massive margin, but that just goes to show how bad Eula is. Trust me, I love her. She's absolutely awesome and has a great design plus personality, but she sucks. Fremine was a step in the right direction, experimenting with other mechanics that are related to physical damage, such as Shatter, but it still wasn't enough to make him a meaningful option worth playing over most other options. To make the reaction better? Not hard. Add some Death Ignore to it, as in the strongest buff that you can give to absolutely any kind of character's DPS output. Before you claim that to be far too unbalanced, bro, really? Eula's on life support. I think the buff is genuinely justified considering how horrible physical damage is. That's another thing. This is a game about elements, let alone reactions. Even something like Geo is inherently going to have an advantage over physical units, so you're always going to be at somewhat of a disadvantage when playing physical, which isn't how things should be. Giving the reaction, or I suppose a non-reaction, some insane ability which really ups the damage of its units would really help things. Plus, it'd also encourage silly player experimentation. You'd see people try Superconduct in places that you would never expect to see it, to try see if a Death Ignore would be better than the standard buffs that they use for their team. Notice that? It's an incentive to use Superconduct! Before you say, make a Chevros for it. Nah, they tried making a dedicated physical support with Mika. Ah yes, Mika, the fantastic Farina healer. Bro is good, don't get me wrong, but not because of anything to do with physical teams. I suppose they could always try again, sure, but buffing Eula and Fremine should be the least of Hoyo's concerns in all honesty. Instead, they should try to employ point number 2, which would be making better physical carries. The fact that Eula was banished to the Chronicled Wish displays how even Hoyo themselves believes the character to be outdated. Do you think that Hoyo would put actual moneymakers on that banner? No, which is why they slapped long overdue, albeit pretty trashy characters such as Albedo and Eula on it. I spent 60 pulls on the Chronicled Wish banner without proccing a 5-star. Man, when's it coming back already? Hope Eula's back on there so I can finish getting her. What? I like the character, who cares if she sucks? Anyways, Fremine also isn't doing Fizz any favors. Well, he is by being better than Eula, but we need someone better, let's be real, like, Oh my god, you're better than Eula, no way! Please, they front-loaded DPS. Backload clearly, didn't work out for Eula. Sure, let's put it like that. Do those and then Superconduct is saved. Yippee! I do think that Hoyo has been taking the initiative when it comes to reactions as of late. Burning got fixed. Burning! For all we could have known, it might as well have been a dead reaction after Sumeru, yet Hoyo still went out of their way to try and fix it while succeeding. They made Burn Vape more of a thing with Mualani, and in a strange twist of fate, they made Crystallize far more desirable with units such as Navia and new artifacts such as Cinder City. So this means that perhaps we won't have to chalk up any discussion of buffing up horrible reactions as copium. With Shemfers and Emily around, I wouldn't consider these to be such pipe dreams anymore. I look forward to the future for sure, and as a cryo lover, I'm eagerly awaiting Sneznaya's melt meta. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with my ideas, or perhaps you have some of your own. Hopefully this video was able to tell you which reactions are in need of some serious help, with some ways which Hoyo could go about that. This has been Juice, signing out, and it genuinely amazes me that they remembered that Shatter exists in the first place with Fermine. Do you think that they silently stared at the guy in the board meeting who reminded them of Shatter for like 5 minutes after he suggested making a unit who uses it?